I want to tell you something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Something that happened on a Tuesday in late October, on a road I had driven 1,000 times before, in a town so quiet most people forget it exists. I want you to understand something before I even begin. I am not a religious person. I was not, at least. I believed in what I could see, what I could touch, what I could prove with logic and common sense. I believed the world worked in straight lines. And then my daughter looked at a dog that had no reason to be there, reached out her tiny hand, and everything I thought I knew about the world shattered like glass on a stone floor. Her name is Nora. She was 6 years old at the time. And the dog that none of us can fully explain, his name was Jasper. But let me start at the beginning, because if I jump ahead, you will not feel the weight of what happened. You will not understand why a man like me, someone who spent 15 years as an engineer, someone who built bridges for a living, ended up on his knees in a hospital parking lot, crying in a way I had not cried since I was a child. You need to know what came before. You need to know who we were before that Tuesday. My name is Callum Dray. I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania called Dunmere. Population around 4,000, not counting the deer and the black bears that wander down from the ridge every November. The kind of town where everybody knows your last name and your grandfather's last name. The kind of place where life moves slow and the seasons feel longer. I left at 18 to go to university in Pittsburgh, came back at 32 when my father got sick, and never quite found my way back out. That is how it goes sometimes. When I came back to Dunmere, I brought a wife with me. Her name was Celine, and she was the kind of woman who could light up a room just by deciding to be in a good mood. She was from Georgia originally, big family, loud dinners, the kind of childhood full of cousins and front porches, and somebody always playing music. She never quite fit the slow gray silence of Dunmere, but she tried. She really tried. And for a few years, it was good. We fixed up the old farmhouse on the edge of town. We planted a garden we barely kept alive. And then Nora came. Nora was born on a cold March morning, and when the nurse put her in my arms, I felt something happen inside my chest that I still cannot name. It was not just love. It was more like recognition. Like I had been waiting for this specific person my entire life and did not know it until that moment. She had her mother's dark eyes and my stubborn jawline and a laugh that sounded like bells. Everybody said so. She was the kind of child who noticed things, quiet things. She would spend 20 minutes watching a caterpillar move across the driveway. She would ask questions that stopped you cold. Why does the sky change colors at sunset, Dad? Do you think the clouds feel lonely up there? Do animals know what love is? I never quite knew how to answer her, but I always tried. She was also the kind of child who was not afraid of animals. Not in a reckless way, not the kind of fearlessness that gets children hurt. Something quieter than that. She seemed to understand them. She would sit very still near a stray cat until it came to her on its own. She would hold her hand out flat and wait. She had patience that a 6-year-old should not have. Celine used to joke that Nora had been an animal in a past life, and I would roll my eyes because, like I said, I believed in straight lines. The year everything happened, things between Celine and me had gotten hard. I want to be honest about that. We were not fighting. We were not screaming. It was worse than that, actually. We had gotten quiet in the wrong way. The kind of quiet that grows in the space between two people when they stop reaching for each other. She had started talking about going back to Georgia to visit her sister for a while, and I had started working longer hours than I needed to. Nora felt it. Children always do. She had started sleeping with a stuffed rabbit named Pip that she had not touched in 2 years. I want you to hold that image for a second. A 6-year-old girl clutching an old stuffed rabbit because the adults in her house have forgotten how to be warm to each other. That detail matters. It matters a lot. The week before it happened, Celine drove to Pittsburgh for a work conference. She worked remotely for a design company and occasionally had to make the 3-hour drive for meetings. She was gone for 3 days. It was just Nora and me. And honestly, those 3 days were some of the best we had had in months. We ate pancakes for dinner 2 nights in a row. We watched a movie about penguins that Nora made me watch 3 times. We raked leaves in the backyard and jumped in the pile and raked them again. I started to remember who I was when I was not carrying the weight of whatever was going wrong between me and Celine. On the 3rd day, a Saturday, I took Nora to the farmer's market in the center of town. Dunmere has a small one that runs until late October, and she loved it. There was a woman there who sold honey and always gave Nora a little sample on a wooden spoon, and an old man who sold carved wooden animals, and Nora would stand at his table for 10 minutes, studying each one, like she was in a museum. That day she picked a small carved fox and held it so carefully the whole walk back to the truck that you would have thought it was made of spun glass. We drove home on Route 9, which is the road that cuts through the south side of Dunmere and runs past the old Alderman property. The Alderman property had been empty for 6 years. Big old farmhouse sitting back from the road, surrounded by overgrown fields and a rusted fence. There were rumors about the place, the kind small towns manufacture to fill the silence. Nothing serious. Just that old house sitting there with its dark windows, the grass too tall, the kind of emptiness that feels almost loud. That day, as we drove past, Nora said something from the back seat. She said, "Dad, there is a dog in that field." I slowed down. I looked. The field was thick with dead autumn grass, and I could see something moving at the fence line. A dog, she was right. A large dog, sitting very still near the rusted gate. Dark coat, maybe a mix of something big. Hard to tell from the road. I kept driving. I did not think much of it. Dogs wandered all over Dunmere. Half the town had working dogs that ranged freely across the fields. But Nora had turned around in her seat and was watching through the rear window. She said, "He looked at me, Dad." I said, "He probably looks at every car that goes by." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I want to go back and see him." I told her we would, maybe another day, and she turned back around and held her carved fox and did not push it. But I could see her face in the rearview mirror. She was thinking about it. That night she asked me at dinner whether I thought the dog was lost. I said I did not know. She asked if lost dogs were scared. I said probably yes, in a way that I hoped would close the topic. She did not bring it up again that night. But here's the thing, and this is where I have to be careful, because what I am about to tell you sounds like I am exaggerating for the sake of the story. I am not. When I went to bed that night, I thought about the dog too. I do not know why. I am not a person who generally worries about stray animals. But something about the way Nora described it, the way it looked at her, sat with me in a way I could not explain. I told myself I was just tired. Celine came home Sunday afternoon. The warmth that had filled the house while she was gone did not disappear exactly, but it changed shape, the way a room changes when someone turns on a different kind of light. We had a polite dinner. We watched television. We did not argue, but we did not laugh either. Nora went to bed, hugging Pip and the carved fox together. Monday was a school day. I drove Nora to school in the morning, and on the way back I passed Route 9 again. I slowed without really deciding to. The alderman field was empty. No dog. Just the long pale grass and the fence and the gray sky pressing down over everything. I told myself I was relieved. That Monday evening, I got a call from a site in Clearfield County. A small bridge project I had been consulting on had developed a problem with one of the support beams, and they needed me on site Tuesday morning, early. I told Celine. She said fine. It was that kind of fine that is not really fine, but I was tired and I did not press it. Tuesday morning, I left before dawn. I kissed Nora on the forehead while she was still sleeping. She made a small sound and reached out and grabbed my hand for just a second without even waking up. I remember thinking in the dark of her room that she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I remember thinking I needed to do better. I remember a lot of things about that morning. The way the dark room smelled like her shampoo, and the orange nightlight by her dresser, and the carved fox sitting on the shelf above her bed with its tiny painted eyes. I did not know that was the last peaceful moment I would have for a very long time. Celine was supposed to take Nora to school that morning. She did. What she did not tell me, what I did not find out until later, was that she had made plans after school pickup. She had been in contact with her sister in Georgia. She had been making plans that she had not shared with me yet. I am not saying this to make her sound like a villain. She was hurting, and she was trying to figure out what to do with that hurt. But because of those plans, because of a phone call she needed to make, because of one conversation she needed to have privately, the timing of everything that happened that Tuesday afternoon shifted in a way that I still think about. She picked Nora up from school at 3:15. Normally, she would drive straight home. But she needed 20 minutes to make a phone call. So instead of going home, she pulled into the parking lot of the old Dunmere hardware store, which had been closed for 2 years. She told Nora to stay in the car. She stepped outside to make her call. Nora, being 6 and being Nora, did not stay in the car. She saw the field. The Alderman property is only 3 blocks from the hardware store parking lot. You can see the edge of the fence line from where Celine had parked. And Nora, sitting in the back seat, looking out the window, saw the dog. She told me later, in that careful 6-year-old way she had of explaining things, that she recognized him, that she knew it was the same dog from the road. I cannot verify that. I do not know how she could have known. But she said she knew, and I have stopped questioning the things Nora knows. She slipped out of the car. She walked across the empty lot and the thin strip of dry grass that ran along the fence. She was wearing her purple jacket and her little boots with the rubber soles, and she was carrying the carved fox in her jacket pocket because she had started carrying it everywhere. She walked up to the fence and the dog came to her. And here is where the story changes. Because the Alderman property is not just an empty field. What you cannot see from the road, what no one who had not been on that land in years would have known, was that somewhere behind the overgrown grass, about 40 feet in from the fence line, there was a well. An old stone well, dry for decades, covered with a wooden lid that had rotted through years ago. The grass had grown over it so completely that from any distance it was invisible. It was exactly the kind of hazard that should have been filled in and marked and covered. It had not been. The property had changed hands twice and sat in probate once, and no one had done what needed to be done. Nora climbed the fence. She was small. The slats were wide enough. She told me it did not even seem hard. She just wanted to pet the dog. The dog was there on the other side, close enough to touch. She said he was big, dark brown and black, with light eyes she described as gold. She said he did not bark. He just stood there watching her, and when she got through the fence, she reached out, and he let her touch his head. She said his fur was warm, and then he did something. He backed away from her, not in a frightened way, not growling. He backed up slowly, and then stopped and looked at her. She stepped toward him, and he backed up again. She followed him a few steps. He backed up again. She said it felt like a game. She followed him a few steps. He backed up again. She turned slightly and moved a few more feet and stopped. She followed. She said she did not understand what he was doing at first. She said she just kept thinking she would catch up to him and pet him again. She was 6. She just wanted to feel how warm his fur was again. He led her in a wide arc around the center of the field. She did not know it. She could not see it. But he led her around the covered well. He kept his arc precise. He kept her outside of the rotted wood by a distance of maybe 3 feet at the closest point. She told me later she never felt the ground change under her feet. She said it felt solid the whole way. She did not know what she had nearly walked over. Now I want you to stop for just a second and sit with what I just told you. A dog that should not have been there. A property that had been empty for 6 years. A well that no one outside of Old Town records even remembered. A 6-year-old girl who followed a stranger's dog through an overgrown field on a Tuesday afternoon. And the dog walked her in a specific arc, a careful arc, wide enough to keep her safe. When Celine finished her call and turned around, Nora was gone. I want you to understand what that moment is like for a parent. I was not there, but Celine described it to me later. She said there was a half-second of confusion, a scan of the parking lot, and then the absolute cold slam of understanding that her child was not where she had left her. And after that, she said, there was no thinking, just running. She screamed Nora's name. She ran toward the field because it was the only open space near the lot, and a parent's instincts aim toward open space. She hit the fence and saw, about 50 feet into the field, her daughter standing next to a large dog, perfectly still, both of them looking back at her. Celine said she could not breathe. She said she climbed the fence in a way she still cannot explain physically, that she does not know how she did it, and she ran to Nora and grabbed her and held her and asked if she was okay about 40 times without stopping. Nora said she was fine. She said she had been petting the dog. She pointed at him. The dog was sitting a few feet away. He looked at them both for a moment, and then he walked away into the long grass, and Celine lost sight of him. She carried Nora back to the car. She did not call me. She told me that night, back at the house, when Nora was asleep. She told it as a story about Nora sneaking out of the car, which is what she thought it was. She was upset. She was shaken. She was angry in the way parents get angry when they are actually terrified. I did not go to the field that night. I was tired from the drive, and I told myself it was just a stray dog. I told myself Nora was fine. I told myself a lot of things that night. The part of the story that undid all of my straight lines happened 4 days later. On Saturday morning, I drove out to the Alderman property. I am not sure why. I have thought about it many times. Some part of me wanted to find the dog again. Some part of me wanted to see what had drawn Nora in there. I drove out on Route 9, parked at the fence line, climbed through. I walked into the field. I found the well in about 8 minutes. 8 minutes, 40 feet from the fence. The wooden cover was almost completely gone. A few gray rotted planks hanging at angles across the opening. The stone walls dropped into darkness below. I dropped a rock in and counted. I counted to 3 before I heard it hit. I stood there for a long time. I thought about my daughter with her purple jacket and her little boots and the carved fox in her pocket. I thought about the dog backing up, walking her in an arc. I thought about the specific distance between where Nora had been walking and where I was standing. I crouched down and I looked at the ground, and I could see, in the flattened dead grass, 2 sets of tracks. Small boots. And beside them, slightly ahead, slightly to the right, curving wide around the well, paw prints. The paw prints were large, bigger than any domestic dog I had seen in Dunmere, and they curved. A clear, deliberate curve around the exact radius of danger. I do not know how long I was out there. I remember the sky was overcast and the wind was cold, and at some point I realized I was sitting on the ground with my back against the old stone wall of the well, and I had my face in my hands. I was not crying yet. That came later. I went home. I walked into the house, and Nora was at the kitchen table drawing. She was drawing a dog, dark brown and black with yellow circles for eyes. She had not told me she was drawing the dog. I had not asked. I walked up behind her and looked at her drawing, and I felt something move through me that I cannot name even now. I said, "Is that the dog from the field?" She said, "Yes." I said, "What is his name?" She thought about it for a second and then said, "Jasper," like she already knew. I picked her up and held her, and she said, "Dad, you are squishing me?" And I said, "I know." And she let me hold her anyway. That evening I talked to Celine. A real conversation. The first one we had had in months. I told her about the well. I showed her photographs I had taken on my phone. I watched her face go through all the same places mine had gone. The confusion, the slow understanding, the full weight of it arriving like something physical. We sat at the kitchen table for a long time after Nora went to bed. We did not fix everything that night. It would take months more to fix things, and I will be honest, there are things that probably never fully healed. But that night we sat together, and we were both shaking a little, and we were both grateful in a way that was bigger than either of us could hold alone. She said, "What was the dog, Callum? Where did it come from?" I said I did not know. She said, "Do you think someone owned it? Do you think it just wandered?" I said I honestly did not know. She said, "Do you think it knew? Do you think it understood what it was doing?" I was quiet for a long time. I am an engineer. I believe in structure and load and what you can measure. I believe in what holds and what breaks and what you can prove on paper. I said, I think it knew exactly what it was doing. In the weeks that followed, I asked around Dunmere about the dog. Nobody claimed him. Nobody had seen a large, dark dog like that in town. The woman at the hardware store, old Lena Marsh, who had lived in Dunmere her whole life and knew every animal in a 10-mile radius, said she had never seen a dog matching that description. The county shelter had no record of him. The nearest vet had not treated an animal like him in months. He was not on any collar registration in the county database. He was not on any lost dog report. He was not, as far as anyone could tell, any dog that belonged to anyone or anywhere in Dunmere, Pennsylvania. I went back to the Alderman field twice more over the following weeks. I walked the whole property carefully. I found the well again. I found the arc of tracks again, still faintly visible. I did not find the dog. I had the well properly sealed. I hired someone to cap it with concrete and a steel cover, and I put a hazard marker on it, and I contacted the county about the property. That took longer than it should have. But the well is sealed now. Nora still has her drawing of Jasper. She framed it herself, which took her 45 minutes and a lot of tape. It hangs in her room between the shelf with the carved fox and the window that looks out over the backyard. She has never seemed frightened about what happened. She has never, as far as I can tell, fully understood what she was near. For a long time I thought I should tell her. I thought she deserved to know how close it had been. But then I watched her one afternoon, not long after, sitting in the backyard very still with her hand out flat, waiting for a sparrow to come to her, patient in that impossible way she had. And I thought, she already knows something about that day that I will never fully understand. She trusted the dog. She followed him. She does not need me to explain the geometry of what he did. She was there. Children carry things differently than adults do. They do not need to translate experience into logic to honor it. They just hold it. They just know. I have thought about this story 1,000 times in the years since. I have tried to explain it in every rational framework I know. Dogs have acute spatial awareness. Dogs can sense changes in ground stability through their paws that humans cannot detect through shoes. Dogs are sometimes simply territorial and back away from strangers in ways that look deliberate but are just instinct. I have tried each of these. I have held them up to the light and turned them and tried to make them fit. They do not fully fit because of the arc, because of the specificity of the arc, because a dog operating on pure instinct does not maintain a careful 3-foot buffer around a covered well in tall grass while simultaneously luring a child to follow it through patient theatrical retreat, because the paw prints curved in a way that, when I measure it against the location of the well, is almost geometrically perfect. I am an engineer. I know what I measured. There is a version of this story where Jasper was just a stray with good instincts and a healthy fear of rotten wood. I cannot disprove that version, but I also cannot make myself believe it is the complete version. There is a version of this story where Nora simply got lucky, where she wandered into a dangerous field and by chance happened to follow a dog that happened to avoid the well, and nothing more mystical than coincidence occurred. I have held that version too. But here is what I keep coming back to. The dog appeared at a specific property on a specific day at a specific time. He appeared near a well that no one in the living population of Dunmere knew about. He appeared near a 6-year-old girl who had seen him from a car window 2 days earlier, and whose instinct to trust animals had never once led her wrong. He led her around the exact perimeter of danger, and then he walked away into the grass and was never seen again. What do you call that? You tell me. Because I have tried every word I know, and none of them are quite right. Celine and I worked things out. Slowly, imperfectly, the way most real things get worked out. There was a period where she went to Georgia for 2 months, and we talked on the phone every night. And Nora drew pictures of Jasper and her grandmother's garden at the same time and asked me on the phone when Mama was coming home. There was a period of hard conversations. There was a period of deciding to try. And then there was a slow rebuilding, the way a bridge gets rebuilt after a flood, one beam at a time, each one tested before the next one is placed. Nora is 9 now. She still talks about Jasper sometimes. She does not talk about him the way a child talks about a memory that is fading. She talks about him the way you talk about someone you know is still out there somewhere, like he is not gone, just elsewhere. I have never corrected her on that. I do not think I should. About a year after it happened, I was out running on Route 9 early in the morning. The sun was just coming up over the ridge, and the fields were gold and gray in that October light that feels like it belongs to another century. I passed the Alderman property. The fence was still there, the grass still tall. The well was sealed now, its concrete cap invisible under the growth. I was running past when I stopped. I do not know why I stopped. I stood at the fence and looked out across the field, and the light was doing something to the grass, making it move like water. I stood there for a while, just looking, and I felt something that I had not felt in a very long time. Not peace exactly, something harder than peace. Something that felt like being trusted, like being looked after by something that did not need me to understand it in order to do its work. I am still not a religious person, not in any formal sense. I do not go to church. I do not have a theology for what happened. But I no longer believe the world works only in straight lines. I have stood at a well in an overgrown field and measured an arc in the dead grass, and I know, in the way you know things that live past argument, that something watched over my daughter that afternoon. Something came to a field it had no reason to be in. Something waited at a fence for a little girl in a purple jacket who had seen it from a car window 2 days before and thought about it ever since. Something moved patiently backward through tall grass until a child followed. Something kept her safe, and then it walked away. I think about that a lot. The walking away part. No reward, no drama, no moment of recognition that I could witness. Just the work, done perfectly, and then the quiet exit back into whatever it came from. There is something in that I find more moving than almost anything else in the story. The grace of it. The absence of any need to be witnessed or thanked or understood. Nora named him Jasper. She drew him in crayon on white paper and taped him in a frame and hung him on her wall. And every morning when she wakes up and every night before she sleeps, she looks at that drawing of dark brown and black with 2 gold circles for eyes. She has never once looked afraid. I used to think that was because she did not know how close it had been. I do not think that anymore. I think she knew exactly what Jasper was from the moment she saw him in that field. I think some part of her, the quiet, patient part that could sit still until a sparrow landed in her hand, knew she was safe, knew she was being held. I just did not know it yet. I know it now. If you have a child who trusts animals, let them. I know it sounds like a small thing to take from a story like this, but trust is its own form of intelligence. Nora's trust was not naivety. It was something older and wiser than either of us realized. And on a Tuesday afternoon in October, in a field no one should have been in, it may have been the only thing that mattered. There is a version of a life where I drove home from that bridge job on Tuesday evening and nothing had happened. Where Nora had stayed in the car. Where Celine had finished her call and they had driven home and eaten dinner and gone to bed, and I had come home and none of this had been a story at all. Just a regular Tuesday. I think about that version sometimes. How easy it would have been. How close we came to that version being the only one. But that is not the version we got. We got the one with the dog. We got the one with the ark. We got Jasper. And for that, I am grateful in a way that does not have words. I have tried to find the words. I am an engineer who spent 15 years building structures meant to hold weight, and I cannot find a structure in language strong enough to hold what I feel when I think about that October afternoon. Maybe that is the point. Maybe some things are not supposed to be contained by language. Maybe some things are only meant to be carried. Quietly, carefully, the way a 6-year-old carries a carved fox in her jacket pocket, pressing it with her thumb when the world feels too big. I carry that Tuesday with me everywhere. I carry Jasper. I carry the image of my daughter with her hand out flat, standing in the gold October light, perfectly still, waiting. And somewhere out there, I believe, something is still walking through fields it has no reason to be in, still doing its work, still moving backward through tall grass, patient and purposeful, waiting for someone to follow. I hope you follow. I hope when the moment comes, you trust what is leading you. It might just save your life.